What's up, Average Joes? I'm back with another Goodreads books list, but this time I'm going to go over my worst books according to Goodreads. So if you didn't see my previous video, I'll link it below. I did my top 10 books that I've read according to Goodreads. So you look at your Goodreads page, you sort it by average rating all across Goodreads, and you see what the top books are that you have read and just reflect on that. So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to look at my worst books according to Goodreads. And I have mixed feelings about several of these. Before we get into that, thank you all for coming back to watch the videos. Please like and subscribe if you're still liking these videos. And always chat with me down in the comments. Let me know what you think about stuff. That's where I like to interact with most people. That's where I do interact with pretty much everybody. So please do that. And let's dive into my worst book. So yeah, this might be the reason why I even decided to do this video, because I looked at my top best ones and I'm like, okay, that's fine. It kind of makes sense. But now I looked at the worst one and I was like, oh man, I think I have some things to say. So now I'm pulling it up here. I'm going to do a screen sharing. And so first one, Star Wars Aftermath. And oh man. So this is one of the first books that have come into the expanded Star Wars universe. So this is like close to the time that Disney took over. And this came out before the first of the new movies came out. So I think when you have such a popular franchise and that has a big change, and you go from and I think this is around the time that they said that all of the previous Star Wars EU books that were now legends and they're not canon anymore, and this started the new one. You're going to have a ton of grumpy Star Wars fans. So I'm pretty sure this one has suffered from review bombing. I can't tell you for sure. I read some of the reviews, and some of them did mention Disney and the new EU, and these books, they don't like they don't talk about, or the main characters are not Luke, Leia, and Han, and people were grumpy about that as well. So you just have those casuals, or even the diehard, like on both sides, the casuals or the super diehard Star Wars fans that are just gonna be grumpy and ornery and just shit on anything. So that's part of the bad ratings. The next ones, I was just really looking at some of the reviews. People don't like the writing style. I guess present tense irks some people. I don't really know anything about writing tenses, and I know I can tell the difference when I'm reading it, but I don't really care either way. It's just how it comes together. I couldn't even tell you what third person present tense or whatever the writing styles are. So those things don't bother me as well. Having said that, I obviously don't agree with this rating. I gave it 5 stars, and I read this a long time ago, but I thought it was a really good trilogy, and this takes place after episode 6 and before episode 7. So between episode 6 and 7, that's when this takes place. I think Han might actually make an appearance in this. I'm pretty sure it does actually at some point in time. So it's that transition of the rebels, the resistance taking over and taking charge, and then the Empire kind of scrambling to take hold. And this is also kind of the time where the Thrawn took place, and I think that also might have irked people in their review bombing, because Thrawn is like one of the most beloved characters and the best villain, and he wasn't in this because it's a completely different canon, different, like it's when Disney took over, so like all that was null. Anyway, there are some awesome parts in this book that actually you can see in the movies. So I know, again, people are probably going to hate it because of the movies and what it changed, but there is a pilot that was, what was his name? Snap Wexley. He's a pilot that is featured in the newer movies. He's one of the main characters in this. You see how he becomes a pilot. You see him kind of like grow up, and his mom was a pilot for the Resistance, and he teams up with another big name pilot that we've actually heard of before in the previous universe this time. So he gets his origin. General Hux, you find out where he came from. Like he was actually like bred by the Empire long before the Death Star was being destroyed, but he was actually bred by them. He's in this as a kid. And then you remember the very beginning of episode 7 when Ray is on that desert planet and you have all those crash ships that she's salvaging from. That battle and why those crash ships are on that planet is in this book. Is in this series. It's in book 3, but that giant huge space battle that happened above that planet happens in these books, and you find out why all those ships are crashed there and how they became crashed there, and that entire battle. So there are moments in this trilogy that actually carry on to the movies. So if you just like to experience all the Star Wars stuff, I think there's enough here to like about it. I'm sure it suffered from review bombing, but I'm going to try and leave it at that because I obviously do not agree with it. This is definitely where you see some nonfiction. So Plant Paradox is a book on nutrition. It has to do with eating plants, or not eating plants. It's very very well written. The doctor's very very smart. He has a lot of great points. I don't agree with everything that he says. Obviously, every nutrition book is going to have caveats. I won't say too much because people won't really care. But I did learn a ton from it. I did like a lot from that book. The Blood Red City, I can understand that. I was not a huge fan of it. Like I said, I got 3 stars. So this was a strange, it's like alternate history. So that takes place during World War II, and I think kind of like Indiana Jones, but with aliens. There are some ancient relics, things buried, and they are alien-like, and these old alien tombs or whatever get uncovered, and it's a race between the Nazis and the main protagonist people. I think it's like a British person and an American. They're kind of teaming up to get to these before the Nazis, and this is book 2 of it. Book 1 I liked enough, even though I gave it 3 stars, which is actually 2 down from this list. Spoiler alert. So there was enough intrigue there. So it's like, okay, Indiana Jones, but with aliens. It was just some parts dragged on too much. Some parts was just like kind of meh. I haven't continued with the series after the second book, so I definitely understand why that's on there. It's okay. I guess if you really want to read something like that, maybe if you like history, that might be a little bit better. Bring Me Back. Oh man, 2 stars is even being generous. It's probably 1.2. This is one of those times where I've talked about when I talk about mysteries and thrillers, how some thrillers are just terrible, and it's the entire drama is derived from the protagonist and how terrible a person they are, or if they're a pathological liar. And like from chapter 2, this whole thing could have been over with, but they just kept lying and kept burying stuff and kept like pushing things. That's like they just make the situation worse and worse. And to me, that doesn't make a good thriller. You're just following a terrible person and making things life worse than itself. That's not really a thriller. Bring Me Back was that. It pull and like these books are, they hook you in the beginning, and then even if you even 30% through, you realize this person is trash and this is probably going to be trash, but I have to figure out how this ends. I have to see how this ends. And I think from now on, if I ever reach those at the 50% mark, and if I'm still thinking this person's trash, I'm just going to go and look for spoilers online because I just really don't want to waste my time. And yeah, this one was that. After I read it, I immediately put it in the discard pile and told my wife, "Don't even bother." I just told her what the entire premise of the plot was, and the spoiler or the hook at the end, the big twist at the end, and she was just like, "Yeah, no, that's not for me." So, Bring Me Back, I highly do not recommend unless you just really want to read a somewhat trash thriller. Suicide Expedition, that's book 1 of Blood Red City. The Cog, this one was not very good. I hate to bash on this one because I think I don't know if it was a debut. It's on Kindle Unlimited. It's very short. It's a doomsday thing. There is a threat of nuclear winter, and I think China, Russia, and the U.S. all get into this like huge, giant buried city silo underground, and all of them are basically pointing nukes at each other, and they're all into this nuclear bunker in this whole city that they've made underground because it's basically going to happen. They're basically like an inch away from that, and the president that takes over is just completely terrible. I think the person who wrote this just really really hates presidents and politicians and all of those things, which for good reason, but they just really laid it on thick how terrible people were. The hook is kind of actually satisfying at the end there, the twist, but for most of it you're just hating everybody, and the perspective that you have was decent. I think it was a nurse, and she just wants to get out of the bunker and leave those people down there. It wasn't great. Spell Hacker. Again, I don't want to bag on newer authors, but this one's probably the worst book that I read last year. It was one of those where, again, after 30%, I was just like, I think this is going to be trash, and it turned out to be fairly trash. And like, there's there's magic in it. There's somewhat of a magic system, but there's zero explanation toward it. I define this as, even though it is like a sci-fi fantasy ish, that's stated as, it's basically a romance in a sci-fi setting. Like I think the synopsis has, they talk about the magic and stealing magical stuff, and there's a heist. They need to steal something, but pretty much it's all direct. It's all just surrounded by a romance, or like a love triangle type thing. There's just like the teens coming into their own and what their sexual preferences, and like it was not good. And like even that romance stuff aside, no explanation as to the magic system or any sort of like how abilities worked or anything like that. The ending was not good either. It was just, again, I don't want to bash too much. Man in the High Castle, also obviously not very good. So I still agree with these things. 2 stars for me. It was about nothing. I think I said this in a video months ago. There was no plot. This was just a hypothetical. Let's wonder what happened if the Nazis won, and it takes place in the 60s. And for some reason, Philip K. Dick thinks that in the 60s, just because the Nazis won, they will exploit human labor again, have basically bring back slavery and indentured servants. And because of that cheap labor, they will somehow master rocket propulsion, and people will travel by rockets, and you can go from Sweden to San Francisco in like 2 hours. And it was and like they're on Mars, and like this is the 60s, and for some reason his hypotheticals thought that. And then there's like mention of an I Ching and some other chance deciding factor that gets brought from Japan, which I had no idea what the heck it was. There was zero explanation of what that was, and I guess it was just supposed to be known. When I was doing a part of a read along, I was asking, and they were like, "Oh, this is an actual thing that they use." And I'm just thinking, well, why wasn't this explained? There's no explanation of that. The characters each didn't really have. It just kind of took a glimpse into their everyday life. The plot is about nothing. It really is, and there wasn't any resolution toward the end. There's just a few times where you hypothesize of philosophical things, and like, is this a universe within a universe type of stupid stuff. And there's like a book that is a banned book that's hypothetical about our actual history, or like if the Americans won. So it's like 2 ifs within the same story. Yeah, no, it was not. I Can't Sleep, another terrible thriller, another terrible hook at the end. A lot of questions that were left unanswered. I think this was really, really short as well. Again, I just wanted to see how it ended. It was just a very troubled person that had a stressful event happened in their life, and they were tormented by it. And I think it ended not cleanly as well, because it left you thinking like, okay, was she imagining this part? Was she imagining this? Did she actually do this? Was this true? Which part was true? What actually happened? It was just a mess, and not really much of a story. Yeah, this is just me bashing on a bunch of books, it seems. Yeah. Carb Fueled, another nutrition book. This one, this is probably getting hated on because, and I just recommended this recently. This is probably getting hated on because it takes a very vegan approach, or vegetarian approach. I'm not vegan or vegetarian at all, not even close. I eat a ton of meat. And I still think this book has a lot to offer, and fiber in general is just fantastic for you. So I'm not going to go into that. I mean, nutrition books are never going to get that great of reviews. Awaken His Eyes. I read this actually a long time ago. This is way early into my like very first book I ever got on Kindle reading. I thought book 1 was fantastic in the series, from what I remember correctly. The series gets progressively worse after that. I think I left off at like book 7, and I just don't have any interest in continuing it. But the first book, or the first trilogy, was fantastic to me. Actually, the first book was pretty slow. It's a lot of buildup. It's like going through training for the longest time, and then the very end kind of there's a big cliffhanger, and then it picks up after that. And book 2 and 3 is a lot of war and fighting and combat, some military tactics. It is very good after the first trilogy. I thought was very very good. So that is, I don't know if how much I would recommend. I don't really know too much about it. I didn't read it in 2017. I read it way before that. This is just my unloading time. Um, yeah, not much to it. I think that's YA as well. It's a nonfiction. Let's see. Empire and Black Gold. I just read this and it's fantastic. Everybody's been loving this book right now. I don't know why people didn't like Empire and Black and Gold much. That's kind of a surprise because the read along that we're doing on Alan's channel is everybody's pretty much loved it. It might be the bugs of it, or maybe the writing, just people didn't click with it. It's been out for a while, so it could be from early reviews. I'm not really sure, but I definitely disagree with this. I can't wait to read book 2. Curse of Jacob Tracy. I could see this. I could see why. There's like 3 stories within this story, 3 or 4, and it has to do with a guy that he's Jacob Tracy. He's cursed. He can see ghosts and paranormal activity, and it kind of drags on. It's pretty slow at certain times and in between times, but it's how I described it before is like a Western Ghostbuster ish kind of thing. He's not like busting ghosts, but um, yeah, if you like paranormal stuff and or the 1800s type time period in the West, the Western, it's a pretty good mix of that. I'll end with this one, Emma in the Night. This one hurts because I love this is probably one of my favorite thrillers out there, and it does have terrible humans in it, but it's not like one person that is driving this entire narrative. Like several of them are just terrible people, and it is just them doing terrible tough stuff to each other. And the suspense and the hook at the end, or the twist at the end, is really really good. I highly recommend Emma in the Night. It's pretty dark. There's some pretty dark things that happen, but the twists are fantastic. The mystery is very good. It has a very satisfying and buttoned up ending from what I remember. I highly recommend Emma in the Night. I'm kind of sour that this one is this low, but I mean, 3.73 actually it's not too terrible. But I would highly recommend. So if there's a positive to bring out of this, so the ones I recommend on this list, Emma in the Night for sure, for a good mystery thriller, Shadow of the Apt as well. And that's it for this. So that is my worst books on Goodreads list. Let me know what some of yours are, what you thought of some of my worst books on here, what if you have any feelings or thoughts towards some of these books that you might have read and you either agree or disagree with the rating. We can chat more down in the comments, but yeah, let me know what might be on some of your lists, and see you later.